Self-doubt is not a flaw in your character or a sign of weakness. It's a biological signal wired into your nervous system. The brain's anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, acts like an internal alarm system, lighting up when it detects uncertainty or potential mistakes. This mechanism evolved to keep us alert to threats, but in modern life it often misfires, turning everyday challenges into sources of paralysis. The key insight here is that doubt is not your enemy. It's misplaced feedback. Instead of trying to silence it completely, you can train yourself to interpret it as data, not destiny. When you feel hesitation creeping in, recognize it as your brain's way of saying, proceed, but with awareness. The goal isn't to eliminate doubt, but to prevent it from hijacking your decision. The most effective way to disarm self-doubt is through action, specifically small, deliberate steps that prove your brain wrong. Every time you move forward despite uncertainty, you weaken the neural pathways that link fear with inaction. Research shows that repeated exposure to manageable challenges builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to handle whatever comes next. This isn't about blind confidence. It's about collecting evidence that you're capable. Start with tasks where the stakes feel low, but the repetition feels high. Each time you follow through, you're not just completing a task, you're rewiring your brain's prediction system to associate effort with success, not failure. One of the most powerful tools for this is if-then planning, a technique backed by decades of behavioral science. Instead of waiting until you feel ready, which may never happen, you create a pre-programmed response to doubt. For example, if I start questioning whether I'm qualified to speak up, then I'll remind myself of 3 times I succeeded in similar situations. This works because it bypasses the emotional debate and shifts you directly into problem-solving mode. The brain loves automation, and by scripting your responses in advance, you reduce the mental energy wasted on second-guessing. Over time, these conditioned reactions become reflexive, turning self-doubt from a roadblock into a cue for action. Another critical shift is reframing mistakes as necessary feedback rather than proof of inadequacy. High achievers don't experience less doubt, they just interpret setbacks differently. Studies on elite performers reveal that they view errors as information, not indictments. When a pianist misses a note, they don't collapse into self-criticism. They isolate the problem and drill it until it's smooth. This is the growth mindset in action. The understanding that skill is built through iteration, not innate talent. The moment you start seeing doubt as a sign that you're pushing your limits, not hitting them, it loses its power to derail you. The physical body also plays a surprising role in modulating self-doubt. When you slump your shoulders or shrink your posture, you send signals to the brain that reinforce feelings of helplessness. Conversely, adopting an upright, expansive stance triggers the release of testosterone and reduces cortisol, priming you for assertiveness. This isn't just fake it till you make it. It's biology. Your posture directly influences your neurochemistry, which in turn shapes your thoughts. Before any high-stakes situation, take 2 minutes to stand tall, breathe deeply, and recall a past success. This ritual doesn't just calm nerves. It creates a physiological state where doubt has less room to grow. Language is another lever for rewiring self-doubt. The words you use internally, like I can't or I'm not sure, reinforce limiting beliefs. Cognitive behavioral therapy techniques emphasize replacing these with factual, action-oriented statements. For example, swap "I'm terrible at this" with "I'm still learning this skill." The first frames struggle as a permanent trait. The second treats it as a phase. Over time, this linguistic shift changes how your brain processes challenges. Doubt thrives on vague, absolute statements, but it starves when met with specific, measurable observations about your progress. Social environment also shapes self-doubt more than we realize. Humans are wired for comparison, but constantly measuring yourself against others' highlight reels is a recipe for insecurity. Instead, curate a confidence ecosystem. Surround yourself with people who normalize struggle and celebrate incremental progress. Research shows that even one supportive mentor can dramatically reduce self-doubt by providing reality checks and modeling resilience. Seek out those who've walked the path you're on and learn how they navigated uncertainty. Their stories remind you that doubt is universal, but it doesn't have to be decisive. Sleep and metabolic health are often overlooked tools for managing self-doubt. When you're exhausted or undernourished, the brain's threat detection system goes into overdrive, magnifying minor worries. Studies link poor sleep to increased activity in the amygdala, the fear center, and decreased connectivity to the prefrontal cortex, the rational decision maker. Prioritizing 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep and steady blood sugar levels isn't just good health, it's cognitive armor against irrational doubt. A well-rested brain is better at distinguishing real threats from false alarms. Finally, embrace the concept of productive ignorance. The idea that not knowing everything can actually be an advantage. Many people wait to act until they feel fully prepared, but that moment rarely comes. The most confident individuals aren't those without doubts. They're the ones who act despite them. Start before you're ready and let competence build through experience rather than theory. Every expert was once a beginner who refused to let doubt dictate their trajectory. The faster you accept that uncertainty is part of the process, the sooner you'll break the cycle of overthinking and underacting. True confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's the ability to move forward while carrying it. By understanding the science behind self-doubt, you demystify it. You learn to see it as a temporary state, not an identity. With the right tools, you can transform doubt from a stop sign into a detour, a signal to adjust your approach, not abandon the journey. The goal isn't to kill self-doubt completely, that's impossible, but to domesticate it so it serves rather than sabotages you. Master this, and you'll find that confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one deliberate action at a time. Confidence is often misunderstood as something you either have or don't, a fixed trait reserved for the naturally charismatic or gifted. But neuroscience reveals a far more empowering truth. Confidence is a skill honed through deliberate practice and repetition. The brain's basal ganglia, responsible for habit formation, thrives on consistent action. Every time you push past hesitation and complete a task, no matter how small, you strengthen neural pathways that associate effort with success. This process, called neuroplasticity, proves that confidence isn't about innate ability, but about building evidence of competence over time. The more you act despite doubt, the more your brain rewires itself to expect positive outcomes. What begins as forced courage eventually becomes automatic assurance. The 85% rule, derived from motor learning research, offers a practical framework for growth. It suggests that optimal skill development happens when tasks feel challenging but not overwhelming, about 85% within your current ability. If something feels too easy, you're not stretching. If it feels impossible, frustration takes over. This sweet spot ensures enough struggle to trigger adaptation, but enough success to reinforce motivation. Apply this to confidence building by incrementally expanding your comfort zone If public speaking terrifies you, start by voicing an opinion in a small group before tackling a podium. Each step at the right difficulty level builds both skill and self-trust, creating a positive feedback loop. Micro wins are the unsung heroes of confidence construction. These tiny daily victories, like initiating a difficult conversation or completing a workout, accumulate into unshakable self-belief. The brain's reticular activating system, RAS, filters experiences based on focus. When you consciously track small successes, you train your mind to spot opportunities rather than obstacles. Keep a confidence journal to document these moments. Over time, the evidence becomes undeniable. A study on habit formation found that participants who recorded progress were 42% more likely to sustain change. The lesson? Confidence grows in the soil of acknowledged achievement, no matter how modest. Language shapes perception, and nowhere is this clearer than in self-talk. The words you use internally, like "I'm bad at this" or "I'll probably fail," become self-fulfilling prophecies. Cognitive restructuring, a technique from clinical psychology, teaches replacing limiting phrases with factual, process-oriented ones. Swap "I'm terrible at networking" with "I'm improving my conversation skills each time I try." This subtle shift moves the focus from fixed judgments to observable progress. Neurochemically, it reduces cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases dopamine, linked to motivation. Your brain believes what you consistently tell it, so feed it narratives of growth, not limitation. Physiology and psychology are inextricably linked, a principle demonstrated by the facial feedback hypothesis. Just as smiling can trick the brain into feeling happier, adopting confident body language triggers corresponding mental states. Power poses like standing tall with hands on hips boost testosterone by 20% and lower cortisol by 25%, according to peer-reviewed studies. These hormonal changes don't just alter how others perceive you, they change how you perceive yourself. Before high-stakes situations, spend 2 minutes in an expansive posture while visualizing past successes. This combo of physical and mental rehearsal primes both body and mind for peak performance. Breath control is another underrated confidence amplifier. The sympathetic nervous system, responsible for fight or flight responses, can hijack rational thought under stress. But deliberate breathing techniques, like the physiological sigh, 2 quick inhales followed by a long exhale, activate the parasympathetic system, restoring calm within minutes. Navy SEALs use similar methods to maintain composure in life or death scenarios. By mastering your breath, you gain control over the physiological symptoms of doubt, shaky voice, that often undermine performance. Confidence isn't the absence of nervousness, it's the ability to function despite it. Social environment acts as either a confidence incubator or inhibitor. Mirror neurons, which fire both when we act and when we observe others acting, explain why surrounding yourself with confident people raises your own baseline. Seek communities where growth is expected and struggle is normalized. Not as failure, but as part of the process. A Harvard study found that students placed in high-achieving peer groups improved their test scores by 25%, not through direct tutoring, but through elevated standards. Your brain subconsciously calibrates its expectations based on what it witnesses regularly. Choose your influences wisely. Sleep quality directly impacts confidence-building efforts. During REM sleep, the brain consolidates skill memories and processes emotional experiences. Chronic sleep deprivation impairs the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate fear responses, making everyday challenges feel insurmountable. One Stanford study showed athletes improve performance by 30% simply by optimizing sleep. Apply this by protecting your sleep schedule as fiercely as your gym routine or work calendar. A well-rested brain has greater neuroplasticity, meaning it learns confidence, behaviors faster, and better emotional regulation to handle setbacks. The final piece is embracing imperfection as part of mastery. Many people abandon new skills at the conscious incompetent stage when they're aware of their flaws but haven't yet automated competence. This dip is where most quit, mistaking the struggle for inadequacy. But research on expertise shows that top performers across fields share one trait. They view practice as refinement, not proof of limitation. Every misstep is data. Every awkward phase is temporary. Confidence emerges not from flawless execution, but from the certainty that you can troubleshoot problems as they arise. True confidence isn't a personality type. It's the natural result of thousands of small, brave actions stacked together. It's the voice that says, "I've been uncomfortable before and survived," because you've collected enough evidence to trust your resilience. By understanding it as a trainable skill, you remove the mystique and make it accessible. Start small, track progress, optimize your physiology, curate your environment, and most importantly, keep showing up. The brain adapts to whatever demands you place on it consistently. Demand courage, and in time, confidence will cease to be something you chase and become simply who you are. The mind and body share a bi-directional relationship that most people underestimate when building confidence. Your physiology doesn't just reflect your mental state, it actively creates it. Studies using electromyography show that simply holding a pencil between your teeth, forcing a smile, increases positive affect by 17% through facial feedback mechanisms. This principle extends far beyond facial expressions to your entire physical presence. When you adopt postures of defeat, slumped shoulders, downward gaze, shallow breathing, you trigger a cascade of neurochemical changes that reinforce insecurity. Cortisol rises, testosterone drops, and the brain's threat detection systems go on high alert. Conversely, expansive postures for just 2 minutes can increase testosterone by 20% and decrease cortisol by 25%, chemically priming you for confident action. Breath control serves as your body's built-in anxiety override system. The sympathetic nervous system's fight-or-flight response evolved for life-threatening dangers, yet gets triggered by modern stressors like public speaking or difficult conversations. When this happens, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making, gets temporarily sidelined. But through deliberate breathing techniques, you can hack this response. The physiological sigh, involving a double inhale through the nose followed by a long exhale through the mouth, rapidly resets your autonomic nervous system. Navy SEALs use variations of this technique to maintain composure in combat situations. By mastering just 3 to 5 of these breaths, you can shift from panic to presence in under a minute, creating the physiological foundation for confident behavior. Movement patterns wire confidence at a neuromuscular level. Research on embodied cognition reveals that how you move shapes how you think and feel. Athletes who visualize perfect performances while mimicking the corresponding micro movements show nearly identical neural activation patterns to physically practicing. You can leverage this by acting as if, adopting the movement vocabulary of the confident version of yourself you aspire to become. Walk with purposeful strides, gesture with open palms, maintain steady eye contact. These physical patterns send feedback loops to your brain that gradually reshape your self-perception. Over time, the line between acting confident and being confident blurs as your nervous system internalizes these patterns as your new normal. Vocal physiology plays an equally crucial role in confidence manifestation. The vagus nerve, which connects your diaphragm to your brainstem, acts as a confidence telegraph. When you speak from shallow chest breathing, your voice wavers, signaling uncertainty to both your own nervous system and your audience. Diaphragmatic breathing, where your abdomen expands on inhalation, creates vocal resonance and steady tone that projects assurance. Recording and analyzing your speech patterns reveals subtle hesitations like frequent ums or upward inflections that undermine perceived confidence. Targeted vocal exercises, such as reading aloud with deliberate pacing and emphasis, physically remodel your communication style to match your desired self-image. Nutritional biochemistry forms the often overlooked foundation of confident physiology. The gut-brain axis means your digestive health directly impacts neurotransmitter production. Serotonin, crucial for emotional regulation, is primarily manufactured in the gut. Blood sugar crashes trigger adrenaline surges that mimic anxiety symptoms, while omega-3 fatty acids enhance prefrontal cortex function. Strategic nutrition, prioritizing protein for dopamine precursors, complex carbs for steady energy, and probiotics for gut health, creates the biochemical environment where confidence can thrive. When properly fueled, your brain has the raw materials to maintain emotional equilibrium in challenging situations rather than defaulting to self-doubt. Temperature regulation provides another physiological confidence lever. Cold exposure, through methods like contrast showers or ice baths, trains your nervous system to maintain calm under stress. The initial shock triggers a flood of norepinephrine, enhancing alertness without anxiety, followed by increased dopamine production that can last for hours. Regular practice builds what's called stress inoculation, where your system learns to interpret physiological arousal as energizing rather than threatening. This translates directly to high-pressure situations, allowing you to harness nervous energy as performance fuel rather than being derailed by it. Sleep architecture completes the confidence physiology puzzle. During REM sleep, your brain processes emotional memories and consolidates skill learning, both critical for confidence development. Sleep deprivation disproportionately impairs the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate amygdala-driven fear responses. Just one night of poor sleep can increase next-day anxiety by 30%, according to clinical studies. Optimizing sleep hygiene, maintaining consistent schedules, creating dark/cool environments, and avoiding blue light before bed ensures your brain has the nightly reset it needs to approach challenges with clarity rather than unwarranted self-doubt. Eyes serve as both receivers and projectors of confidence states. Pupil dilation, which increases during focused attention, and blink rate, which decreases during confident certainty, sends subtle but powerful social signals. More importantly, where you direct your gaze shapes your mental state. Studies tracking eye movements reveal that people tend to look downward when accessing emotions, but upward when problem solving. Consciously maintaining level gaze during challenging interactions engages more cognitive resources and projects assurance. Eye contact synchronizes brain waves between speakers and listeners, creating connection and authority. Training your visual focus literally changes how your brain processes social situations. The final piece involves synchronizing these physiological elements into confident rituals. High performers across domains develop pre-performance routines that combine posture, breathing, visualization, and movement to reliably access peak states. These rituals work because they provide predictable neurological anchors in unpredictable situations, A simple 3-step confidence protocol might involve power posing for 2 minutes while practicing diaphragmatic breathing, visualizing 3 past successes in vivid sensory detail, and speaking a key affirmation aloud with commanding vocal tone. Repeated consistently, this kind of multisensory conditioning creates automatic confidence responses on demand. True physiological confidence isn't about eliminating nerves, it's about channeling that energy productively. When you understand that confidence lives as much in your body as your mind, you gain multiple leverage points for transformation. Each deep breath, strong posture, steady gaze, and controlled movement sends cumulative signals to your nervous system that rewrite old patterns of hesitation. The body learns through repetition, not just of thoughts, but of concrete physical experiences. By deliberately engineering these experiences daily, you sculpt both the physiology and psychology of unshakable self-assurance. Confidence becomes not something you have to think your way into, but something you've trained your entire being to embody. The spotlight effect is one of the most pervasive cognitive distortions undermining confidence. This psychological phenomenon causes people to vastly overestimate how much others notice and judge their actions. Research from Cornell University demonstrated that people consistently overestimate how negatively others perceive their mistakes by nearly 40%. This hyper-focus on imagined scrutiny creates a paralyzing self-consciousness that stifles authentic expression. The truth is, most people are far too preoccupied with their own perceived flaws to scrutinize yours with the intensity you fear. Breaking free from this mental trap begins with recognizing it as a biological misfire, your brain's threat detection system incorrectly labeling social situations as dangerous when they're merely unfamiliar. Oxytocin, often called the social bonding hormone, serves as nature's antidote to excessive self-doubt in interpersonal situations. When released during positive social interactions, this neurochemical reduces amygdala activity while enhancing feelings of connection. You can deliberately stimulate oxytocin production by shifting focus from "how am I being judged?" to "how can I contribute value" in social settings. Studies of effective public speakers show they experience the same physiological arousal as nervous beginners, but interpret it as excitement rather than anxiety. This subtle reframe, coupled with warm, inclusive body language, creates a virtuous cycle where your calm begets audience receptivity, which further boosts your confidence. The 5-second rule, developed by Mel Robbins, exploits a critical neurological window between stimulus and response. When faced with a confidence-testing moment, hesitation allows the prefrontal cortex to overanalyze, while immediate action leverages more primitive motor pathways. Counting backward 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and moving creates just enough cognitive interruption to bypass doubt's paralyzing effects. This works because the brain's basal ganglia, responsible for automatic behaviors, can execute actions before the overthinking cortex vetoes them. High achievers across fields use similar ritualized launches, from athletes' pre-shot routines to performers' backstage habits, to consistently access peak states regardless of external scrutiny. Social media has dramatically amplified the spotlight illusion by creating permanent highlight reels against which we compare our behind-the-scenes struggles. Neuroscience reveals that viewing others' curated successes activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The solution isn't withdrawal, but conscious consumption, following accounts that normalize the learning process rather than just showcasing polished results. A University of Houston study found that limiting social media use to 30 minutes daily significantly reduced anxiety and depression symptoms within 3 weeks. Curating your digital environment as carefully as your physical one ensures you're feeding your mind realistic benchmarks rather than unattainable ideals. The Dunning-Kruger effect offers an ironic twist to confidence perception. Those least competent often feel most confident because they lack the awareness to recognize their shortcomings. Conversely, truly skilled individuals frequently underestimate their abilities because they understand the complexities involved. This explains why many talented people hesitate while less capable ones charge ahead. Recognizing this paradox allows you to reframe imposter syndrome as evidence of actual competence rather than proof of inadequacy. The very fact that you worry about being found out suggests you possess enough expertise to appreciate what you don't yet know, a hallmark of genuine mastery in development. Cognitive diffusion techniques from acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, provide powerful tools for distancing from self-doubt. Rather than trying to eliminate negative thoughts, which often backfires through rebound effects, you learn to observe them with detached curiosity. I'm having the thought that I'll fail rather than I'll fail. This subtle linguistic shift creates psychological space between you and your doubts, reducing their emotional impact. Studies show that simply labeling emotions as they arise, this is anxiety, decreases amygdala activation by over 30%. When you stop treating passing thoughts as absolute truths, they lose power to dictate your actions. The illusion of transparency compounds spotlight anxiety, the mistaken belief that your internal state is more visible to others than it actually is. Psychological experiments demonstrate that people overestimate how obviously their nervousness shows by nearly 50%. What feels like visible trembling or a cracking voice often goes completely unnoticed by audiences. This explains why even seasoned performers report feeling nervous before shows while appearing perfectly calm to observers. Keeping this disconnect in mind helps normalize performance anxiety as a universal experience rather than a personal failing. The adrenaline you interpret as weakness is actually energy waiting to be channeled into passionate delivery. Social baseline theory revolutionizes how we understand confidence in group settings. This psychological model proposes that human brains are wired to offload regulatory functions onto social networks, meaning we're literally designed to draw stability from others. In practice, this means viewing audiences or teams as potential collaborators rather than critics. Studies of successful leaders show they maintain lower stress hormones during challenges because they delegate cognitive load to their groups. Adopting this mindset transforms intimidating situations into collective problem-solving opportunities where the pressure isn't solely on you. Confidence becomes less about perfect individual performance and more about effectively mobilizing group resources. Practical exposure therapy remains the gold standard for overcoming spotlight anxieties. The brain's fear response is extinguished fastest through controlled, repeated exposure to feared situations without catastrophic outcomes. Start with low-stakes practice environments, speaking to small, friendly groups before large audiences, sharing ideas in team meetings before executive presentations. Each positive experience rewires neural associations, gradually replacing danger signals with opportunity markers. Virtual reality simulations now allow accelerated exposure, with studies showing 70% reduction in public speaking anxiety after just 4 VR sessions. The key is progressive challenge, pushing boundaries enough to grow, but not so far as to trigger avoidance. True confidence in the social spotlight ultimately comes from shifting from performance mindset to service mindset. When you focus on what value you can provide, rather than how you're being perceived, several psychological transformations occur automatically. Your attention moves outward rather than inward, your body language becomes more open and engaging, and your communication gains authentic conviction. This aligns with the psychological principle that purpose buffers stress. Having a clear why makes any how more manageable. The most impactful leaders and performers share this common trait. They care more about their message than their image. When you make this mental switch, the spotlight stops feeling like an interrogation lamp and becomes simply the illumination needed to share what matters.